Well, because there was a $5.50 price difference, I think.
This is welfare to
So we're
corporations.
buying what was $3 lunches, which was a saving of $5.50 for the taxpayer. Here's the thing, Martin. Economies of scale. If you want to deliver large amounts of high quality, low price goods, you're going to need to have one large organization to do it. That's how economies of scale work. So if Seymour says, I've got so much money and I need to deliver so much product, then I've got a large corporate and it can do it. And that's going to result in what he's got, which is a $3 meal. Now, I'm not going to defend the quality of the food because I haven't tasted it. But here's the other thing. It's not the government's
Can I, just before we play this line, can you just watch how angry he gets? Like, this is real rage. When he says this, watch the face.
Because I haven't tasted it. But here's the other thing. It's not the government's job to feed your children. It's your job to feed your children. And all that Seymour is doing is adding a little bit of calories for those children. It's your job as a parent to feed your child in the morning, and it's your job as a parent to provide them lunch, and it's your job as a parent to feed them in the evening and the afternoon. And if you can't do that, if your ability to provide for your children, don't forget, the government provides the schooling for free. The cost of educating your children costs you nothing. And if you are still unable at that point to provide food for your children who only exist as a consequence of your actions, if you can't do that, I'm not really interested in your whinging and moaning because the food that has been provided by the taxpayer at no cost is not up to the standard that you're not even prepared to provide for your own children. So these people are not providing food for their children, criticizing David Seymour for the food that he is providing. Not interested. Bomber, I can see you're just burning. You've got some sick...
Yeah, and they don't go on that. He just makes a statement, then he leaves. And Chewy, I'll give you first crack, sir.
Damian Grant doesn't understand what a society is. He doesn't believe in it. He's a libertarian that somehow hopes for some sort of Mad Max universe where we're all still very profit driven and somehow don't murder each other in the first 5 minutes. The reason that schools are provided free by the state is because it's generally been acknowledged that that's great for society, to have an educated populace. They're better workers. They're better producers. They're better taxpayers. They don't go around murdering people for meat. And I love this whole thing of like, yes, it's a parent's responsibility to feed their children. Yep, fantastic. But what if they can't?
Or won't? Can't or won't?
What if they can't or won't? Is that the child's problem?
Mm-hmm.
Should they then starve or die and be cast aside as not being a useful profit producing member of society? Because that seems to be the position that Damian Grant wants to get really fucking angry about. He doesn't like poor people, obviously. He thinks poor people shouldn't have children, which is getting really scarily close to eugenics, another famously popular policy of libertarians. He hates poor people, but he wants to make sure that cycle continues, that no one gets out of that poverty trap. You're too hungry and deprived to go to school and learn. You continue being a poorly educated person on a benefit for the rest of your life, having children early, repeating that cycle again and again and again. I can tell you, Damian Grant, because I know you listen to the show, I am a childless taxpayer. I am a worker. I have zero problems with my taxes going towards feeding children that are in school to learn. I don't care whether those children are poor. I don't care if they're middle class. I don't care if they're wealthy. I believe that part of the school system should be free meals, because the evidence points to all students having better outcomes if they're fed. I have a big problem with corporate welfare, because that's exactly what David Seymour's lunch program is now. Corporate socialist funding going to an overseas multinational that doesn't pay their taxes and has many, many complaints about the quality of their food. He has saved money and taken that taxpayer money, given it to that overseas company, and taken it out of the regions and the producers around the country. The localism that we had around feeding school kids, the money was going to the regions. That's gone now. It's just gone to a big UK-based multinational that doesn't pay their taxes. That doesn't sound like, yes, it's cheaper. It doesn't sound like a good use of taxpayer money to me.
It just, for the first time today, because I listened to that today and yesterday, last night and today, and I just thought, after I heard him say that, what does Damian Grant think a government's job actually is? Because if you think that a government's job is not to feed children, then surely logic would dictate that it's not the government's job to feed anyone. So in an ideal world, it's not the government's job to provide a safety net, a welfare system. It's not the government's job to provide a pension. Because is it that different saying feed children? Because okay, it's government's job not to have any kind of safety net, because, you know, your family should be supporting you, 22-year-old, if you haven't got a job and you're on the job seeker. That should be the family's job, not the government's job. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and you said the word eugenics, and I hadn't thought about that until I listened to it now. And in my head, I was going, what's that fucking word? Gene? What is it about genes? And it did sound, I was thinking exactly the same thing for the first time, just as we heard that. And when you've got somebody who it seems has an ideology of, fuck all of you guys, if you're struggling, that's your fault, then really, what can you say about them? Because even if you went down that path of eugenics, like you shouldn't have children, man, I was married, moved to Dunedin, separated, and was destitute with children for probably a year to 18 months. So what happens to me? Like, what happens to me? No income, mortgage to pay, kids to feed. What happens to me? I was in a situation where I was feeding and clothing my kids, and then I had a separation and I wasn't able to. Well, it's not the government's job to feed those kids, my kids, that I had no income for 18 months or so. That makes completely logical sense. So I should have just been, homeless, on the road, in the car, not out of car, eating out of trash bins. Not the government's job to feed my kids. What do you think beneficiaries do? They feed their kids on government money. The government is feeding those kids. I just, I don't know why today it kind of hit me differently, but it hit me differently today when I listened to it.